I call Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party will be supporting these bills to Select Committee. We have had a look at them. Of course, we only received some of the legislation at the very last moment yesterday, so it's been difficult for us to delve into all the implications of the minor technical changes. On the surface of it, looks like they're okay. I want to speak specifically to the Regulatory Systems Building and Housing Amendment Bill, which makes changes to the Buildings Act, fixes a number of cross-referencing errors, and removes a redundant provision. There are over 40 changes to the Unit Titles Act 2010, and they're ranging from fixing grammatical errors to updating body corporate operational rules. And I suppose that this would be an area where we would say we haven't had sufficient time and will be interested in the Select Committee process to ensure that the changes that are being made, particularly to the Unit Titles Act, are all in line with the Green Party's values. Obviously, there are a number of challenges that exist, particularly around urban development in Auckland. While we're very supportive of providing more homes and more complete communities within the existing urban area in Auckland, so that we have affordable housing, access to jobs, good transport options, walking, cycling, and public transport for communities. We're somewhat limited in our ability to deliver that, in part due to the current nature of development that is there, and some of the provisions in the Unit Titles Act make it very difficult for there to be the type of redevelopment which you would normally expect where land values are very high. So that's something that we would like to have a bit more of a look at, and we'll have to see what the Select Committee process brings up, and particularly the interaction between the Unit Titles Act and the Public Works Act. And one other interesting proposal in this legislation, which I'm a bit disappointed about, is the changes. This would be in the Commercial Matters Amendment Bill, Regulatory Systems Commercial Matters Amendment Bill, the changes to the Construction Contracts Act. So many years ago now, we had the meltdown of Mainzeal, which led to a number of subcontractors being complete out of pocket, unable to access their tools, unable to be compensated for work that they'd already undertaken. And it took ages for the government to act on that. I remember sitting in Select Committee hearings about that in 2013. We heard from a whole range of subcontracting associations who were saying that they were being hard done by primary contractors. And so this was a very public issue, and it was something that eventually in 2014 the government announced that they were going to act on. And then finally we did have the Construction Contracts Amendment Bill come back to the House with some proposals that in fact were very similar to what the Green Party had proposed, what I had proposed as a supplementary order paper, amending the Construction Contracts Act to provide protection for subcontractors so that they would ensure that the money that had been paid for work, set aside for work that they had done, couldn't be used for other projects and other purposes, so that if the main contractor was to go bankrupt, their money would still be protected and they could be compensated for work that they had undertaken. And that seemed only right and fair. And I guess the disappointing thing for me is that although we had the changes to the Construction Contracts Act, and that was a big win, the change proposed in this legislation is amending that legislation and only requiring retention money to be held in trust from March 2017, which is, you know, more than, it's almost 2 years away. Well, it's a year, it's several years after we amended the act, and certainly main contractors should have known that this was coming and should have been protecting the money that they were paid for subcontractors in the first place. And finally that law was changed. The law was well signaled. I think that it's unfortunate that the law is not going to be protecting contracts that are currently being undertaken, that we're waiting until March 2017 to give that protection to subcontractors when they've already had to wait so many years to have that rightful protection of their money in law. So that's something that I'm disappointed about in this proposed legislation. But on the whole, it looks like a lot of minor changes that are mainly fixing cross-referencing errors, grammatical errors, redundant provisions, and I suppose it does raise the question, why is it that our legislation is being passed in a form that has so many errors in it? Was there a time, perhaps, when this government first came in that we were under urgency, passing bills under urgency, and we didn't give them proper scrutiny, that now we have to go back and fix all these minor problems? Perhaps we should be taking the time to pass legislation that isn't full of grammatical errors and cross-referencing errors in the first place. That would be nice. That's something that I'm sure the Green Party and other opposition parties would like to see. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.